The old graveyard of St. Nicholas here at St. Anne in Castlelyons dates at least to the 14th century and was in use up to and until the early 1960s. All that now remains of the 14th century church is what appears to be the bell tower, which has two large Gothic doorways or windows. Above each arch is an ogee-headed window. The north-facing window is a double ogee head made of limestone. The east-facing window, however, is a single ogee head made of limestone and sandstone. The sheer height, build and style of the 14th century church is reminiscent of the bell tower of an abbey. The tower also displays on its eastern wall evidence of a gable end and the remains of what would have been two walls, perhaps of adjoining rooms. This would imply that the chancel of the church would have been where the Barrymore mausoleum now stands approximately. Therefore, it is fair to say that the mausoleum was in fact built inside the chancel of the old 14th century church. The western face of the wall bears no such evidence. However, built inside this wall and the north wall is the 18th century Church of Ireland chapel. The Church of Ireland chapel was built in 1771 and was in use up to the late 1950s or the early 1960s. The eastern wall of this church, the chancel, boasts a large tracery window. According to local folklore, this window once was part of the earlier church and was removed sometime during the late 17th century, soon after the Church of Ireland chapel had been built. A large and beautifully ornamented archway separates the nave from the chancel in the eastern sector of the chapel. In the southern eastern corner of the nave there is a chimney and cast iron grate, where presumably the rector of the time would light a fire during service. Unfortunately, it is now not possible to see the underground heating system of this chapel. The north wall of the chapel has two Gothic windows, while the southern wall has three. All five are unfortunately blocked up. St. Nicholas's graveyard itself has possibly some of the best examples of 17th century memorials in Munster. This is the Barrymore mausoleum, and the Earls of Barrymore, who were David the first Earl, died in 1642. Richard the second Earl died in 1694. Lawrence the third Earl died in 1724. James the fourth Earl, who commissioned the mausoleum and died in 1747. Richard the fifth Earl died in 1751. Richard the sixth Earl died in 1782. Richard the seventh Earl died in 1793. And finally, the eighth Earl, Henry, died in 1823. Also dedicated to the Peard family is the south-facing mausoleum. Dates for this mausoleum are uncertain. However, it is most likely to date 17th century at the earliest. During a recording module carried out some years ago in this graveyard, 2 headstones were found to date 1689. The oldest of these is a Georgian headstone which is dedicated to Jane Thomas. The other headstone is dedicated to Sylvester Jessop and her daughter Sarah May. 2 table tombs were also discovered during the recording module in this cemetery, and those dated to the 17th century. The first of these is dedicated to the memory of the Voyle family of Castlelyons. The other tomb is dedicated to the Peart family, who were considered to be tyrannical landlords and who lived in Castlelyons during the 17th and the early 18th centuries. The earliest section recorded on this tomb dates to 1683. The graveyard here at Kill St Anne in Castlelyons is both a Church of Ireland and Catholic graveyard. The majority of the Church of Ireland memorials are located in the northeast section of this graveyard, and most of them date to the early part of the 20th century. Most of these memorials take the form of plain crosses, gabled tombs and/or cross slabs. There are also a number of Church of Ireland graves in the southern section of this graveyard. However, the majority of these are Catholic. The memorial types vary greatly. They can range from Celtic crosses to plain headstones and to gabled tombs. The majority of the headstones in this graveyard are, however, what was classed as shouldered or Georgian. It can be said that this old graveyard of St. Nicholas's here in Kill St Anne in Castlelyons is steeped in history, and it is amongst one of the best examples of a 17th century graveyard in Munster. This graveyard has some outstanding examples of artwork and stone masonry, with every form inscription technique represented, and also a varied range of symbols and ornamentation that reflect the excellent craftsmanship. So, if visiting the Castlelyons area, why not consider paying a visit to St. Nicholas's graveyard here in Kilsaint-Anne in Castlelyons, and see for yourself some fine examples of 17th century memorials, probably the best in Munster.